wonderful professional panelists. And without further ado, let's get into the meat of the matter. First thing, the speakers, you have only 2.5 minutes in terms of questions. We stick to the same 2.5 minutes you are allotted to answer, and we'll take it from there. But I want to start the ball rolling with this first question. I want us to listen carefully. All right? The silent ache men experience when encountered with familial challenges, being emotional and physically abused by a female partner or a male counterpart. How is this treated in the systems that are designed to protect and serve? Let me read it again. The silent ache men experience when encountered with familial challenges, being emotionally and physically abused by a female partner or a male counterpart. How is this treated in the systems that are designed to protect and serve? Now the option here now is, any of our panelists can choose to answer this, but this is the state of affairs. I could choose someone, but I'm hoping you volunteer.
Well, I could begin the discussion. I think it's a very compounded statement. There's a lot to deal with when it comes to what was just stated. I think that it's important to break it down and think about, okay, what is the cause? Because now we're speaking about the silent ache, which is why are men being silent, or why are they remaining silent on this particular situation? So that's I think for me that's the first part we have to deal with. That what is causing that, and then now what is the solution? Because then the solution would then come from how this is being treated in the systems that are designed to protect and serve. Now there are things that are put in place to protect persons in these situations, but then the question is, are persons coming forward to invoke or ask for the court's protection when it comes to these situations? Yes.
Just to follow up on this, when it comes to male and female, if you're encountering problems at the home, being abused and these kind of things, if a female enters the police station and makes a complaint on a male counterpart, the action will be swift and thorough and aggressive. But if a male enters the police station and proceeds to state that his female counterpart had abused him or hit him or something like that, I've heard stories where policemen actually laugh at the man. So you could see here where men would often want to be silent and not talk about the issues or even go to report an issue such as this, because it could be embarrassing for him, and sometimes this happens in our society, believe it or not.
I believe that we should start from culture, because I believe that it all begins in our homes, it begins at school, at church. Men were raised to not show their emotions. Girls were raised to, yes, you can cry. If you cry, I'll beat you. I guess that is what the response that you would get from a parent, if a boy child cries, if something happened. So I am saying that our culture sometimes is to be blamed. And that is why I'm saying that there has to be a shift. We need to shift, because culture, the world, it's changing. So if we can sensitize our boys from now, from small, to show your emotions, speak up when something is wrong. Even when you feel sick, men don't even like to go to the doctor, that's the first thing. So if we can sensitize them when they are small, I think that we can have a better response from men.
Thank you very much. Next.
I'd like to build on what Chanel was saying, Ms. Charles was saying, in terms of sensitizing our boys and culture, especially more specifically in the there are ways that boys are socialized differently to girls, in the sense that when it comes to them showing emotions, they're not permitted, or it's not a safe space. They're not welcome to express themselves freely or express what they're going through emotionally. It's seen as a weakness in a number of ways. And I feel like if we try to promote boys and men expressing themselves more openly and freely when it pertains to their emotions, it could help aid in, especially for younger boys, them being more, growing up to be more balanced human beings and individuals, because that way they will know how to express themselves, they will know how to communicate better. Because I know boys tend to express themselves in more aggressive ways than women. And as we go back to the main point of the question being, how is this treated in the systems that are designed to protect and serve? As Mr. Clark would have said, is that when men complain or they go to the police station, it wouldn't be taken as seriously as it would be for women. And that goes back to them actually talking about patriarchy, where men are supposed to be strong, they're supposed to be able to handle and take on different challenges and not really show that they're going through something. So it's like, how could you feel a way that a woman abused you or emotionally said, like, abused you or said something to you? Like, you can't handle that. So that's what I have to add.
All right, thank you very much. Before we move on,
I'd like to.
now I'm going to let you speak, of course I will. I just want to remind us 2.5 minutes. Keep it brief. But at the same time also too, I just want to ensure that they're understanding generally what is being said in different areas. The culture of toughness that is being put forward, the unwillingness to come forward because, taught that this is not male, this is not masculine, transparency, and basically how men are being viewed in culture. Go right ahead, sir.
Yes, so to answer this question, I think obviously it needs to be framed in a few contexts. One, the topic that this podcast is constructed upon, and also the 16 days of activism. We just look at some of the key terms in the topic, which again is the paradox of patriarchy, how traditional gender norms can work against men. And a paradox is a thought that contradicts itself in and of itself. So, and patriarchy is a system, according to the Oxford Dictionary, a system of society or government in which men hold the power and women are largely excluded from it. And so the paradox would be that men in a patriarchal society, they should hold the power. But then if it hurts them at the same time, that makes it paradoxical. How traditional gender norms can work against men. Gender, we know, is socially ascribed. Because your sex would be male or female at birth based on what genitalia you have, but gender is a social construct. So how you identify and what rules you follow as it relates to what is male and what is female according to society. But the norms is something that I want to point out. Social norms are the perceived, informal, mostly unwritten rules that define acceptable and appropriate actions within a given group or community, thus guiding human behavior. And so we are looking at how the paradox of patriarchy can actually controls human beings, guide their behavior. And so to answer the question now about the silent A, and how men treat with the physical or emotional abuse of a female or male partner or male counterpart, how this is treated in the systems that are designed to protect. As was mentioned, sometimes men have trouble seeking protection from the law, from the police, and it goes back to the social norm that as a man, it's an unwritten rule, but it's said a lot, that you're supposed to be tough, you're not supposed to cry, and so on. And so for at the first point, men sometimes don't even approach the law. I've counseled and spoken to a lot of men, spoken to women too, that tell me plain out that they just beat their partner, as if, like a child. So, and he do this and let him have it. You talk to the man, yeah man, yeah, she was, hit me sometimes, gets handsy. And he's being abused, but first, he tough. So nothing is going wrong, nothing is awry. And so we have to look at that's how our social norms affect and weigh down our men. That's one, they don't approach, and when they do approach, there is sometimes not listened to. And the protocol that the police have dictates that they are to listen to any sufferer of domestic violence. And so that's how we have to really look at it. It is by law. Police have a protocol, they must listen to men when they come to them, but they ridicule them instead. So any man who finds himself in that situation have to seek redress. The Department of Gender is here today.
Thank you very much, sir. I want to move on to our second point here. Is there no questions? It says here that the power struggle between young men engaging in subcultural behaviors. The power struggle between young men engaging in subcultural behaviors. How is this false sense of manhood and bravado fueling aggressive behaviors amongst our young men and their female partners? The power struggle between young men engaging in subcultural behaviors. How is this false sense of manhood and bravado fueling aggressive behaviors amongst our young men and their female partners? I don't know who would want to write this first.
Well, I would like to say that the wording of this question is elaborate, but it's basically saying boys who are into gangs and stuff, and this type of behavior is very aggressive. You have my gang here, your gang there, and I'm against you, you're against me, and it's fueled by violence. So basically, if you're a product of this system, recently it kind of quelled the gang society in our society has kind of quelled, but in like 7 to 10 years ago, we had a lot of gangs throughout the Federation of Sinkits and Nevis, right? And a lot of violence. But if you're in a relationship coming out of that type of atmosphere, it'd be hard for you to tone down. Because I'm on the street and I'm this gangster with this gun in my waist. You can't tell me anything, I'm the baddest out here. When I get home, I'm not going to transform into a tiny little, teddy bear. I'm still going to be aggressive. And anything that my partner comes against me with, I probably want to hit. So I could see where when children gravitate towards like gangs and they behave in these sort of, they use drugs and they drink alcohol and they have this sense of not wanting to add positively to society, then in relationships it could harm them, and sometimes the females end up, to be victims from these type of individuals.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown.
So I would like to add on to that. So when we talk about subcultural behaviors, I know the question doesn't specifically state what type of subculture, but when we talk about subculture, we're looking at a specific group that has specific beliefs and interests as opposed to a larger group, which we could basically see it as society. So if we're talking mainly about criminal subculture and what that entails, then we could also talk about what it means to perform gender performativity. So when you think about, or when we talk about gender performance or performing gender and what it means, we're talking about the way the person talks, the way the person acts, the way the person dresses, what ideas or values they impose upon that specific subculture or the belief system that they they should also, as they perform within that specific subculture or group. So that's also another way that we could talk about the subcultural behaviors that cause them to be aggressive. What does that subculture state that they should act and look and dress like?
And on that note, we'll break for 20 minutes and we'll be back.
Mike's new.
Break for a few, not 20.
Break for a few. Break
Yeah,
for a few.
break every 20.
I don't know why this 20. I don't know why this 20.
So when I give you when I give you the 1 minute, that gives you enough time to wrap up, and then when I tell you break now, is then when you go break. Okay.
Okay.
I'm telling you.
I would like you to get in.
Yeah, I think that's
It is dealing with the information.
yeah,
Yeah.
it should be more like a discussion. I'll let you guys lead the discussion.
Just ask each other questions.
You can see. So can you see my hand do 1 minute? Alright, so I'll do
That
1
is
minute.
Yeah.
Then it's a break.
Hmm?
I'll go to cool. And I give 5. You have 5 minutes. Like everybody needs 5 minutes. And then I give you 1 minute. Then you have a 1 minute to just wrap up the week, and then we'll see when I do it back in the
This is one
Okay, cool.
It was introduced to legal here.
Everybody good?
Still? Till now? Hold it. You might still on this. Somebody started.
He said they could hear us.
Okay, thanks a lot. Off now?
All right, we're back once more, continuing the podcast of the paradox of patriarchy, how traditional gender norms can work against men. And, well, some information just came. And I just want to share this quickly and then we move on. That in the law division, the law enforcement, to sort of put a stop or what's the word I want to use? To mitigate against the whole aspect of having males laughing at males when they come to complain about being abused emotionally and physically by females. They have put in place a SVU, Special Victims Unit, that comprises of females. So there's some more compassion, more understanding, and I want to thank Officer Williams for that. I want to say thank you for that as well. But this is good information, okay? And I'm just putting that out there. We come back to where we left off, and the last person we had speaking was Ms. Gums. Douglas, okay. And we want to get the other panelists' view on this.
So I would just like to point out on this question that there's a reason why patriarchy can be looked at as paradoxical. Patriarchy is a system where men are in charge, they hold influence and power. But you could rest assured that all men don't bear influence and power in a patriarchal society. And so by its very nature, there would be men who are suppressed, men who are marginalized in a patriarchal system. That's why we have to deconstruct the patriarchal systems that we have around us and ensure that we enter into more egalitarian arrangements. So that being said, take a gang for instance, mainly made up of men. They're women. Traditionally, women would be supporting roles, maybe used as mules or, different lower ranking, seen as lower ranking duties in a gang. But the men in that gang, there's a leader, and the leader asserts himself on the men. They get, and we know because we've seen images of it in our society, where men who are participants in gang, they get disciplined. Worse than children get disciplined. They get slapped and kicked on backs, right? There are instances where these men even suffer sexual abuse at the hands of their gang leaders. And so you must understand that even in a system like that, where men are running the show, there are men who would be suppressed and victims. When a man who is a victim in a gang leaves the gang and goes home, he then finds himself in power, and he then perpetrates the same aggression on those who are beneath him, right, so to speak. And so that is how patriarchy can actually hurt individuals in a society, including men, and it perpetuates aggression, especially to women and weaker men, where those men find themselves in leadership.
Thank you very much, Sir Philip.
If I may, moderator, just to fuel some discussion at the table, if I could just ask this question, because the subtopic, we're speaking about a false sense of manhood and bravado, which is fueling aggressive behaviors. But where is that false sense coming from? Is it from the individual, or is it given from the persons surrounding that individual? Because when we're thinking about power, okay, I can feel like I am empowered, but another way that I could feel like I'm empowered is by the persons that are around me that make me feel like I'm empowered. So I was just wondering, what is the panel's view on where is this false sense of manhood coming from?
I would say it goes back to what I was speaking about when I talked about performing gender and the criteria or the unspoken criteria or standards upheld by said gangs, right? Because if we're talking about where it's coming from, and like the example Mario gave, if he's around the gang leader and the gang leader mistreats them, they're learning and also like trying to emulate that behavior on like people they see as if they see people beneath them or as inferior once they leave the gang, because that is something that that behavior they try to emulate and impose on other people, because they feel like that is what makes me a man, or that is what a leader looks like. So that ties back into the same performative gender, because you're performing what it looks like being a leader to you as a man, because it's what your leader, the behaviors your leader would have exhibited while you were around them. And you also take a look at the respect that you see, or what you think or seems as if it's respect, which is technically fear, right? That the leader commands in the room or amongst the other members of the gang as well. So if you're looking around and you're seeing that the leader is saying, oh, like, they're cussing them out or they're berating them and so forth, then you feel as if that based on the responses giving to that type of behavior. When you go to people that you feel like are more inferior, you feel like that is how you command attention, that is how you command authority, that is how you stake your place as the leader and the person in charge.
Thank you very much, Ms. Douglas.
I agree with Chanel, but again, we come back to culture. Because if you look at how boys socialize, you would see that in school, they play pitching together. It's about a boy thing. They play pitch together, and I believe that is where it starts from a very young age. And I spoke about before
That is where it starts.
the power struggle, because it is expected of you in school to be a boy. It is expected of you in school, I guess, in your group to be a leader, right? Growing up and being in school, I've seen fights in school, but mostly you would see, I guess, the boys fighting, right? And you would tend to see like a power struggle. Even in a pitching game, you would see a power struggle in a pitching game. Who would win? You know, who would win these marbles? So we can go from end to end, but we come back to culture. We come back to socializing boys when they are small. If we can fix that, I guess we could fix, you know, most of our issues that is happening today.
Well, I think
Thank you
you
very
know
much,
that
Mr.
these subgroups, right? The subcultural behaviors that come out in gangs and other subgroups in society, they construct their own culture, you know, as Ms. Douglas would have mentioned. And so, and the culture definitely would not be reflective of the entire culture that society has as a whole. But at each level, I can see how that culture could have negative impacts. You mentioned pitching. I must have grown up in a new age society, because I remember pitching in primary school with girls, right? Until it was outlawed for girls to pitch, because and then the law was repealed, I remember.
Well, I never
Because
pitched. I'm older than you, and I've never pitched.
you never pitched.
No,
Okay.
I was not even allowed to pitch with the boys.
Me and you gonna pitch one time. but I don't know. I grew up at Charleston Primary. We shared. Everybody played everything together, boys and girls. We pitched, but I understand the point that you're trying to make. That sometimes the cultural norms, the societal norms, may train persons negatively and have them feel they have to assert their power over another.
Okay, one last thing on that. When we're talking about culture and socialization, we have to talk about the media and television and social media. And the world has definitely changed from when I was growing up. When I was growing up, when you looked at TV, the main character and the stars were strong men, you know, like Rambo and these kind of things, where you have masculinity coming to the fore and you're looking up to your heroes. But these days, when you look at the TV, it's a different type of energy. And so we have to be careful also with the media when it comes to the young boys and what they're portraying to our young boys. We have to shield them sometimes. Because traditionally, in a patriarchal society, we know that the man is in control, right? But my question is, are we really in a traditional patriarchal society still? Because if we look around, we can see many changes, even right here in St. Kitts and Nevis. There was a study done by Hilton Grace, and she was saying that over the last decade or so, there have been more female graduates coming out of universities, more females across the Caribbean entering into politics and, you know, becoming CEOs and becoming leaders and managerial positions. So the society that we live in today is definitely not the society that we grew up in, or a traditional patriarchal society. In the recent round of elections that we had, most of the appointees in St. Kitts and Nevis were female. Now, with that being said, we have a little case here of maybe the males being overlooked. I'm not against females, and I'm very proud of all the females, but we cannot overlook men in society. Else, what we'll have is a tipping of the scale where traditionally men were in control of everything. Now we're trying to create this balance and equality, and then after that we have the other end of the scale where the men are marginalized and the women run everything. And I don't think we want that type of society. I think a more balanced society would be best for all.
Mr. Speaker, if I may add on to that, I really like that you mentioned how traditional gender norms are, in a way, let's say, shifting or being shaped now, especially introducing women being in more leadership roles. I feel like when it comes to children don't actually learn about gender norms until the age of 2 to 3. They start differentiating themselves or identifying themselves between whether they're a boy or a girl and identifying as such. And I feel like that actually goes back to Mr. Liebert and talking about the cause, right? Because then we can say gender is taught, right? Socially. So when we think about gender as something that is taught, right, we look at how different individuals play a role in teaching the children what is socially acceptable for a boy and for a girl. It starts at an early age. And as they go back to, or as they continue or progress throughout life, they start to perform those same things. They start to look at what other boys and other girls or older people are doing, because they say, well, my daddy doesn't do such and such. Or even when it goes back to different like stigmas or stereotypes as well, it's who they see. Because if you ask a group of children, like, who is a pilot or who is a doctor, what the first thing they come to mind, even adults, the first person that comes to mind is a man. You don't ever usually think you're first, and it's just an unconscious bias that we've developed, because that is what has been shown in the media. Like you said, it's what's being shown to us, it's what's being taught. So it's what we learn, and we have to try to unlearn, or as you said, deconstruct, or move away from that standard or viewpoint or perspective. Because if we actually start to show the different ways in which women show up or in different roles, it actually opens up the children's minds to saying, this is possible for me as a young woman or as a girl. This is an area or field that I'm actually open in or welcomed in, especially when it comes to like IT and different things like that. It's really showing the children that they can also be a part of those spaces, whether they're a boy or female or male or whatever it is they choose to identify as.
Yes, wait, can I speak quickly? Something that I don't agree with is you saying that the children, what they identify themselves as. I don't think that any child, that's just my belief. I'm not against anyone who believes this, but any child can identify if they're male or female. Or we shouldn't leave it to a child to say, is how I feel. So my 4-year-old son could tell me, I feel like a little girl, so I'm a little girl. I'm totally against that part of what they're bringing into the gender equation. I'm totally against that, in my opinion. So I don't believe that a child identifies as male or female, because a child is a child. And I, as the parent, I know that my child is a little boy, because I was there from the ultrasound period. But that's just my perspective, right? But a couple years ago, when Usain Bolt came out to say that he was expecting twin boys, CNN brought it out on Twitter. And there was outrage because everyone was saying, congratulations, congratulations. But someone said, how dare you identify them as boys? I mean, come on. When you go there, the ultrasound technician says, if you see the little thing dangling, that's a boy. And if you don't see any, you have a girl, right? But they're saying now, especially in the American culture, that you cannot tell a little boy that he's a boy. You cannot tell a little girl that she's a girl until he or she decides what they are. I'm against that. Just had to interject.
I just wanted to clear up that when I
Yes.
talked about the children identifying, I'm talking more about the physical aspects of what they're able to see. So when they're young, so it's based on the toys that you give them, how they choose will boys play with trucks, girls play with dollies. It's what they emulate, it's what they learn. So
How
it's
they
basically,
socialize.
yes, it's what they view. So it's how they socialize more specifically, not necessarily thinking that or saying that they identify on a gender scale of, oh, I'm a boy, I'm a girl, or whatever other part. Yeah. So I'm talking about more about the socialization aspect of it.
All right, and on that final point, we're going to take a little break now. All wonderful inputs.
How much time? opportunity to become powerful.
Yeah,
There's no
But-
limit to a woman right now.
Wait, one quick thing. For me, I'm not seeing much women coming forward when it comes to politics. What I'm seeing is when women enter the arena, you would always hear the bashing. Oh, she have a man head. Where you going with that? I believe that the Governor General, she has been there. She has experienced it all. She have heard it all, even about her teeth in Parliament, even about her head in Parliament. So for her to go to that level, I believe that she's a strong woman, and that is where her calling is. But for me, this head in Parliament, I don't think I want to be there. I could remember when Jacinth Henry Martin was running as well. He would have heard the same bashing. So I am not seeing the amount of women that should be in Parliament being out there. It's limited, and now we only have how many in Parliament? 3, 2?
Well, we have one elected in the National Assembly.
But do you believe... Before you continue, Mr. Lewis, sorry, you're going to get a chance. We have, and you're going to get it, man. I'm going to make sure, I know, man, I felt the passion. But we have a question in the audience, and we want to give credence to that.
Okay.
We want to, yes, we want to.
So it's not so much a question as a statement.
Yes. Could you state who you are, please?
My name is Teresia, and I'm an education for Oxford.
Thank you very much.
And so sort of in response to Mr. Clark's comments, while women are more educated than men at this currently, and so we seem to be progressing, there's also a serious pay gap. There's also the fact that women are, our society still values a woman's top role as mother, right? And so even if we attain the highest educational whatever, our role as a mother has to take precedence over everything, right? So I forbid, I was granted, so we're putting me and my partner in the same position, right? He's granted a job that allows him to travel worldwide. That's fine for him, right? Because I'm here. But as a mother, for me to leave, like say 6 months of the year and leave my children here, just think about our society and what the comments will be, right? No matter the fact that I might be the top of my whatever educational attainment and has a job that is super important, that I am the only one that could do this. My role at the end of the day is to mother and raise children. That's how it's seen in society. Here still. So I will still be sort of bashed and looked down as for neglect. As mothers, we have to make those decisions when we accept jobs. Like I can't accept a job that has 50% travel, so I might have to accept a job that pays less. I can't accept anything that would, I can work 8 to 4, but then I have to think of how my kids are getting home from school, how are they gonna, who's making dinner, and those sort of considerations that, well, men, there are active fathers, right, who think of this as well. But a lot of the times, that's not a determinant in whether they can accept higher paying jobs.
Thank you for that input. Before I ask one of the panelists, because there's something very, very, very important you were just alluding to, I want to give Mr. Leiber the chance to bring out his very passionate point that he's been holding on to.
Okay, well, one thing that Mario said, he used the word allow, which means that women have to be allowed into this particular room. And then my colleague over here then also said that she believes that women are not entering into these spaces because of this particular reason. But are they also not entering because they feel like they have to be allowed into? So it's not like, although I want to enter into, I can't enter into unless I'm given permission into entering into it. And then now, who is giving the permission? So that's really my question. Who is giving the permission? I believe that the answer will be the man. But then also we have to think about who gives the man the power. Because for the man to allow you into the room, the man must have the power to allow you into the room. So who is giving the man this power, right? And then it has to come from the community. So is the community the one that is creating this particular beast in a sense? And then we have to hit a balancing act now, because we still need to be able to be at the point where we need to empower our young boys, but we have to ensure that when we are empowering them, that power does not translate into aggression, because now I feel like, okay, I have the power, which means that I have the power over you. So how do we strike the balancing act? Because we need to empower our men, but we have to ensure that when we're empowering them, they are not going to translate that particular power into aggression, or I feel like I have something over you.
I see why you were so passionate. I see why you were so passionate. Wow. And remember, I am only facilitating. The point that was raised by our dear sister actually leads us into our third area. Women are progressively becoming the breadwinners of the household. The power dynamics have shifted and are now creating deeper marginalization for some men. So the answer to as she spoke about what is taking place. And if the woman leaves, because what we have been told, if a woman leaves, she has abandoned her family. They would say she's an unfit mother and these different things, which is, we know that's society. But let's see how we could marry these two. So women are progressively becoming the breadwinners of the household. The power dynamics have shifted and are now creating deeper marginalization for some men. It didn't say all men, it said some men. Who would like to comment on that?
Going on, adding on to Mr. Loiber's point about who has the power or who has the control. I think the answer is gender sensitivity. Because when we think about gender sensitivity, here it says gender sensitivity is the process by which people are made aware of how gender plays a role in life through their treatment of others. And when we talk about examples of gender sensitive practices, it says area 1, women and men have equal opportunities to enter the parliament. And 2, women and men have equal opportunities to influence the parliament's working procedures. 3, women's interests and concerns have adequate space on parliamentary agenda. So it's about sensitizing the society and saying women and men are on equal grounds to make these types of decisions. They should be open, and that we should create a space for women and to educate the public on this as well. Because as Shina was talking about in terms of the women, I feel like it's a fear because of scrutiny of being a woman in politics, because of what the public will say. As you said about like having a man head and teeth and stuff like that, they attack a woman's character. And a lot of women, they're not comfortable, unnecessarily, they're not comfortable with putting themselves out there in front of cameras or being on such a platform, knowing that the public are feeling as if the public is going to tear them down. Because if a woman is strong, she look healthy, or she's a man, she does work out too much, all types of stuff, or so it's like, a lot of the times it's not necessarily that sometimes the space isn't created, but it's the willingness or feeling safe enough to even step up to the opportunity or to take it because they're afraid of what scrutiny comes along with it as well.
I would agree with you. Okay.
If you would listen to, when the politics of women is happening, and you listen to the public, you would hear, that minister was chosen by a specific minister. You would always hear, she was chosen. But in reality, is it that these women wanted to be there? That's the question. If you are agreeing, if you are heard the same conversation.
What you reiterate it and I sure I follow the question.
When the women, when they are chosen for parliament, you would always hear they were chosen by another minister.
Okay.
Right? So I'm asking, in the society, would you have been hearing the same thing that I'm hearing?
Well, I think in terms of them being chosen, well, I know you have to be asked, and it's the party structure. If you're going to be, what do you mean, chosen to be a senator and so on, you have to be asked. Invitation. I mean, I suppose you could volunteer.
Okay. But that's what I'm getting at. That's what I'm getting at.
I suppose you could volunteer, but it's
thinking of
the power.
Just they have to ask, and if the opportunity is there for them to also step up too.
I mean, Chanel, next election, call whoever wins, volunteer, right? But generally, you're asked. And you have to look at the power again. Who has that power to ask you? It's the party structure, party leadership, maybe the prime minister. The prime minister definitely selects ministers, right? It's his sole prerogative, his or her sole prerogative. But in terms of who would become senators, it might be a wider big group of people who are the leadership of a party. You have to be asked. But I agree with you in what you would have said about the scrutiny that women come under, and the answer is gender sensitivity. Who allows? It is the head of our parties are largely men. Even if you have a political leader that is female, just tear the veil. It's been years, and in a patriarchal society, there are men, generally older men too, right, who consolidate power, and looks like they hold on to it with their life, right? So for these women to get an opportunity to run or to be asked to be a senator, it's these men who have to give them the power, right? For women to advance, it's over the years. For women to advance, it's men who have to make that way for them. For black people to no longer be slaves, it was white people who had to make it possible, emancipation possible, right? So it's because it's very rare that those who are without power can change their circumstance, right? And so that's one of the things that we have to be cognizant of. But the public sensitivity, I think, has to be seen as important for women to hold these positions of power. It has to be important so that our political parties and the people who have the power right now see that it is necessary that we increase the number of women who are on our political slates.
And on that note, we're coming up to our break. And so we're going to break for a few minutes and then we'll return. Okay. Okay, we're back again, and a question was raised, and so we have to go back to the audience, as I was told by my counterparts, because a serious question was raised, as why is it, and we want to hear from the person in the audience, the officer, if you could please. Yes, you have to share. Just ask the question, you don't have to worry about it.
The question that came to mind is, how come more women don't push for more women power nationally?
All right, so in my opinion, because I can only share my opinion, when we look at patriarchy, because of the name, we sometimes become delusional and think that it's only men who benefit, right? While men are the ones who have the power, it doesn't mean that men are the only ones who benefit from patriarchy. As I would have mentioned before, there are men who are disadvantaged by patriarchy. There are also women who are advantaged by patriarchy, and they are the ones who would continue to perpetuate it. Women are some of the fiercest defenders of patriarchy. Why? Because the opposite, the total opposite, not removing patriarchy, but the total opposite of patriarchy would mean that women would have power. And I suppose, not a woman, they can share, I suppose the thinking is that, well, what if that woman isn't me? Right? I'm just saying that might be the thinking, I don't know. Not done any research. And so you see, women are some of the fiercest vanguards of upholding patriarchal structures. Women would campaign against increasing power and influence for women. I've seen that. There's a particular church, I know they had their international conference. I would have looked at the case maybe about 4 years ago. What was being put forward was that women be made to ascend to the highest level of the church, because as it is, they were not allowed. They would get to a certain point, and they would have to stop because of the agenda, right? And the people who opposed that were women. The pastors' wives formed a committee to stop this motion from going forward. Again, if women ascend to the highest levels, then they would have pastors' husbands, right? So the pastors' wives not going to be top. You understand? They would be non-existent. So they probably see it, I'm guessing again, not can't be sure, they're probably saying, well, my role done with. So they reinforce patriarchy, reinforce suppressive gender norms. So, but in our society, again, gender sensitization, we have to put forth the message that there's room for everyone, male and female. We can live together, work together, and it's better when we do it together. It's better. Societies thrive when more women are in parliament, and so we need to, put women forward, create the safe space, allow women, and allow our population, because our politicians, what they do, they push messages. That's how they get you to vote for them. They need to push the same message that women are just as equal and women have something to share. They need to push that. The people would then buy into it and understand it's okay for me to vote for a female representative. Right? So,
thank you very much, Sir Philip. I want us to move on to, and this is going to be our final point for this morning. Number 5, the UN 2030 Agenda focuses on, and we know this, leaving no one behind. We must consider our people living with disabilities and the migrant population who are more likely to experience abuse for longer periods of time because they have difficulties and concerns when accessing the support that they need. And this is very crucial. Their dependency on other people means that they are reliant on the abuser for personal care or mobility. We're dealing with the paradox of patriarchy, how traditional gender norms can work against men.
Mr. Moderator, let me say before we wind down that men in the Caribbean, for sure, I must speak as a Caribbean man, men are in crisis. Right? In terms of, if we look at our prisons, sometimes you could count the women on one hand, right? Packed with men, overcrowded with men. We need to build our new prison for men, right? If you look at our schools, the lower streams, I taught there, packed with boys, right? If you look at our institutions, mental health institutions, mental health plagues mainly our men, the vagrants on our street, men. Our men are in crisis, and any look that however, in our Caribbean society, the focus, the UN arm for gender is called UN Women, right? So we look at a bias. We have men in crisis, but we have a huge focus on women. Why? Globally, that may be necessary, but we need to be sensitive to where we are, right? And so, remember, patriarchy doesn't benefit men, all men. And so, even when we look at the 2030 agenda, I want to encourage us, look at it with that perspective, that our men are in crisis, even our men with disabilities. Talk about gender norms. If you're a man and you have a disability, you can't provide. Recently, I heard the testimony of a man. He became ill, couldn't work, and he was in a serious crisis. His child's mother was putting him in court to pay, and threatened with prison to pay the support for the child.
Yeah.
And that killed him, right? Because he could work. He's disabled now, can't work, and
No, he's
when
being
you
forced to, yeah.
beyond being forced to, just know you can't provide as a man, because the norm says you are supposed to provide, or you're not a man. So when we look at men with disabilities, we must have special key and consideration for them and see how we can empower, especially our men with disabilities.
Yeah.
Right? Because patriarchy says you're not a man, right? You don't have influence, you don't have power, so that power is exerted upon you. All right, so patriarchy is not a good thing. It hurts society. It hurts both men and women. And so I would just posit that we look at it as we have people in crisis, men in crisis in St. Kitts and Nevis.
So now you feel like men are being left behind, because in a sense that's so interesting what you just said, because I could draw the comparison to even when I was in school. I was in a class of females. There were barely any men in my school. Even where I work, I'm the only male lawyer. I think even at the AG Chambers, it's probably only 1 or 2 lawyers. So I think that's very interesting. So now the question is, are our men being left behind? And I think it was very interesting what you said before as well. You said the patriarchy does benefit some men, but it also doesn't benefit other men. So are the men that are being left behind, do they fall within that bracket of those that aren't benefiting?
But certainly, they would fall in.
Okay. I would like to say that I love women, and don't take that wrong. I'm glad that
I love women. Take it how you want.
I'm married, you're not married. But anyway, in the early 1900s, women couldn't work. You understand this? They had to stay home and look after the children. Today, a woman can do anything. There's no limit to a woman and what a woman can do. So that means to me that we have changed in leaps and bounds. So there's nothing a woman cannot attain. But my concern is leaving the men behind. All right, that's my major concern. So in all of this, we should look out for especially the boys, because they have a lot of pressures on them from society to perform, to be manly, to be intelligent, to be a provider, a protector. So we have to shape these boys, and we have to let them know that there's room in the world for them. And
definitely,
there was a question earlier from the crowd that was saying that men and women, they're not equal in all aspects, and that's true. And we may never be equal in all aspects. I'll give a little example. Serena Williams, when it comes to tennis, right? She gets paid significantly lower than the male counterpart who wins, say in the US Open or what's not, right? And many argue that, that's huge. They should be getting paid the same amount of money. And Serena Williams herself said men and women are not equal in that front. And she actually went out and she played against maybe a 200 ranked player, and she lost significantly. So that's just to say that men and women will never be equal on some fronts. Like, for example, no disrespect to women, but I wouldn't want to know that we have an all-women army to protect our borders. No disrespect, because I would want a man to protect our borders, right? Not saying that women cannot join the ranks, but I wouldn't want an all-woman army. So, with that being said, women have come very close, and they're equal in almost every sense. But there are some things inherently natural given from God that could never be changed, no matter what society tries to change.
Okay.
I would like to say, in reference to the UN 2030 agenda, I think we should look at just not being exclusionary. And when I say that, if we're referring to persons living with disabilities or the migrant population, we shouldn't be looking at just equality but equity and understanding the difference between both. Because when we look at equality like when we talk about resources, you're giving everybody the same thing, right? They're given equal opportunities. When we look at equity, we become more inclusionary and we account for people living in different circumstances, especially if we're just speaking about male or female, women and men. For example, if you have a mouse and you have a giraffe and there's a fence there, and the giraffe has a long neck, so the giraffe could reach the apple. But you're saying, when you talk about equity, how does the mouse, who is at a disadvantage of being able to reach towards the tree, what resources can you give them in order for them to also meet the same level or the standard as the giraffe? So we have to try to meet everyone where they're at for different circumstances and start to be more inclusionary and looking at intersectionality. How does a woman, a single mom or a single dad, what are the opportunities they're afforded? How does society impact them and their circumstances? How does society impact a male with no kids versus a woman with children? What opportunities are they afforded? So.
One of the things you mentioned is that this strain that is on our boys, and if men are in crisis, boys are in crisis too. They have to be manly. That's the expectation. But in St. Kitts and Nevis, where we have over 50% of our households being single-parent households, Minister Iseline Phillip would have shared on Saturday at our award ceremony in her address these words that for a boy to be a man, he has to see a man. And so with close to 50% of our boys growing up not seeing a man, but the societal norm is that they must be man. Then how would they achieve that? You can understand the crisis that our boys find themselves in and the reason why they deserve our attention. And I would just like to say that patriarchy has failed. And what are we going to do about it? Patriarchy has failed our men, our boys, our women, and our girls. What are we going to do about it?
It's a bit of a controversy because we are saying women are getting there. That's what we are saying here. And then yet we are saying that some population of men are not being represented properly. And I'm asking, how do we address this matter going forward when, yes, we are seeing the change happening? Is the change more in a negative sense or is it more in a positive sense? But when we look at it, how is this change going to happen? Even though we see that the world is changing, how do we change for the positive? How do we help disability, men with disability or people with disability? It's easy to sit here and say what the UN 2030 agenda is saying. These are just words, they're just words on a paper, but how do we achieve these things? How do our department achieve these things? And I'm looking at sometimes we don't even have resources. We don't even have enough resources, to put our best foot forward for these populations. How do we get to Parliament? How do we take our message to Parliament to change some of these things? The Patriarch, I don't know and when and if we can ever change it. But there's always these many questions that lurking in our mind. How do we get these things changed?
Well, we have actually come to the end of this wonderful panel discussion. I just want to wrap up here that basically the paradox of patriarchy, how traditional gender norms can work against men. We hear the need for awareness. We hear that it affects all levels. We have heard that it benefits some, disadvantages others. And what I am going to ask you to do now is to give one final statement to conclude this whole discussion. And we start from my immediate right here. You know, you always get in trouble like that.
Yeah, I'm always that. I don't know if it's going to be one final statement because there's actually something I actually wanted to say. But but I know that Mr. Mario gave an example of a disabled man being in court and he has to pay child support, he's not being able to work. So now I'm thinking about, well, how do we help that particular person? So if they're not asking for help, do we still reach out and try to help them? So I think that's where we need to look at now, because even if we are not getting support from the head, that doesn't mean that our feet are cut off. We still need to be able to help that particular person, because at the end of the day, he does have an obligation to support his child, but he's not in a situation where he can even support himself. So what are we going to do now? Because we still need to be able to empower that particular man. But that's just what I wanted to say in relation to that. But my one final statement is, I hope we all benefited from this discussion. I must say it was very thought-provoking. And once again, thank you to the Department of Gender Affairs, and I do look forward to other discussions like this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leiber.
Yes.
So, Philip.
All right, I kind of gave my final statement earlier. Men are in crisis, boys are in crisis. Patriarchy had failed, and we need to do something about it. So I'll use this 1 minute to say, respond to Chanel. We can't look at it as male against female, or supporting men or supporting women. Ms. Douglas shared about equity, and meeting people where they need it the most. And that is what we have to do. We have to be an empathetic nation, government, Department of Gender, community service organization, and people, persons. We have to be caring persons to look out for people and support people where they need it the most.
Okay, so I'd like to end off by saying, earlier this month, I would have actually had the opportunity to attend a dialogue discussion in St. Lucia, and I would have witnessed the amazing Dr. Rosina Wilshire, and she would have spoken about gender equality and sustainable development. And one of the things that really resonated with me that she said was, we are not only the problem, but we are also the solution. So I feel like that statement is really strong, and why I feel like it resonates so much with me and how it's applicable to this discussion right now is we could take into account how I think Chanel was talking about, like, where do we even start? Where we start is also recognizing that we are the solution. Even just in talking about gender-sensitive language, how we communicate with other people, how we impact the people that we come into contact with on a daily basis, is really being mindful about what we say, how we show up, how we inspire. Because sometimes you inspire people and you don't even know it. Like, you'd be sitting somewhere and you don't even know somebody noticed you, or like they're inspired by you and they become the next future leader, or you inspire them to speak up about their issues. So it's really just showing up and being the change yourself, just always showing up and playing your part or doing your part.
Yes, I just want to say thank you to the Department of Gender Affairs. I think it's a Nevis, and this was a very informative discussion. I would like to say thanks to the other panelists. I really enjoyed myself here, and this is a good initiative that we need to do more of, so that we have awareness in the community, and that people who have issues can come by and be counseled or get advice, So I'm very glad and proud that I was here. And I'd like to say to everyone out there, young and old, that you can do anything you want to do and you can achieve anything you want to achieve, just believe it.
Okay, so the discussion this morning was very good for me, and I hope that it got to the ears that we were intended for it to get to. But I like the topic, but I think we need a round two. We need a part two.
I agree.
We need a part two. I just want to applaud our department, and I just want to applaud the Nevis department as well. For always collaborating. Our collaboration has always been strong. I guess when you get, minds alike to come together, And I'm praying that we continue the collaboration, the strong collaboration, and I pray that, you know, that our work can get stronger. Ms. Douglas talked about, you know, us being the change that can get the work done. So I guess we have a lot of work to do. So I'm looking forward to round 2, as I said. Right? So nice meeting everyone.
Yes. Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, and we have come to the end. Thank you very much, one and all, for joining us, and we hope that you have been enriched and you have been informed.